Mitch McConnell, when he went out and he had a soundbite where he was saying that impeachment ought to be rare and is not good for the country. Now, he was not saying, and I'm not saying this as a McConnell fan, but I think that there's a strategy in play here, and I wanted to talk about that because McConnell isn't saying that he doesn't believe it's warranted. I think his comment was more so directed towards Democrats, but there are people who just hate Mitch McConnell enough that I think they want to internalize everything. But he's because he's right. It's not good for the country if you're using it as a weapon like Democrats did. It's not Republicans that are dragging this towards any kind of impeachment or legal inquiry. It's Democrats who, by their actions, are doing so. And so I wrote about this last night that I think Republicans need to let McConnell play this card because the country's tired of impeachment talk and they're tired of, the DC intrigue, like I was saying earlier. And I also think that while the base welcomes a completely legitimate, based upon the facts, into this very well documented and pretty damn legitimate suspicions on the Biden influence trading, I think you need to be seen going through the proper protocol, adhering to the rule of law. Because if the GOP base was enough to win elections, then we wouldn't have to convince anybody else. It wouldn't matter. To hell what you moderates think, right? We wouldn't care. But it's the moderates and independents who need winning over. The people who are not tuned in every single day like you all are who need winning over. And you're not going to win them over by repeating Democrats, their bizarro rush headfirst into an impeachment process with literally zero criminal charges and not even an investigation. So Republicans can't just look like the party that cares about rule of law. They have to legitimately care for rule of law. And to that extent, the Republic. And they have to contrast their careful adherence to the law with the reckless disregard shown to it by Democrats. Now, I've said this before, but it reminded me again of that John Adams defense of British soldiers who were involved in the Boston Massacre. Because Adams I think he was like 35. He was grieving the loss of a child. He had another baby on the way. He was very well known to support the Patriot cause as active. And on March 5th, 1970, that's when there was an argument at a pub, and it was sort of carried out into the streets. And then there were a group of rope makers, and among them Crispus Attucks, who was an American hero. He was the first fatality in the American War for Independence, and he was kind of at the head of the group. And there was this sentry outside of the Boston Commons House, or Customs House, and that's where the business of the day was kind of carried out by the Brits. And they were kind of going at this sentry. And then as other redcoats joined the sentry, the crowd grew in numbers and in fury. And then it all went sideways and shots were fired and 5 people were killed. Now, the British captain, Thomas Preston, he was mad that his redcoats had fired. But during the trial, they were actually arguing self-defense. I think this is one of the first self-defense cases. Proto-American self-defense cases. And they said that they believed that their lives were in danger and they acted to defend themselves. Now, Adams was a staunch supporter of the Patriot cause to the point where he knew that America could not be a republic, would not be seen as a legitimate republic, particularly like the founders had envisioned, if the burgeoning country could not even pass the first test, which was due process. The dream of self-governance would have been forever ruined if the Patriots could not prosecute impartial trials. And it was for this reason that he accepted the case. One of the founding fathers defended the redcoats in trial. And he focused, laser focused on facts alone. And he did not involve the Patriot cause. He did not indict the Sons of Liberty, didn't do anything like that. And the verdict, he was incredibly successful. The verdict resulted in the acquittal of 6 soldiers and 2 manslaughter convictions for the remaining 2 redcoats. Now, here's the thing. The colonists, even though all of this was controversial, the colonists accepted the verdicts. Because John Adams did this in the face of his cousin, Sam Adams. You had Sam Adams and John Adams. Sam Adams was a fiery speaker. He was a hellraiser in the streets. He was the one who was leading, along with Paul Revere, the Committees of Correspondence, Sons of Liberty, all this. They were the ones leading the charge on this. And they amassed a protest outside the courthouse on the first day of the trial. So They were really leading the narrative on that. He was a messaging genius. And then you had John Adams, who was not a charismatic guy. And he was a legal scholar, very smart, not in any way as outgoing and out there as his cousin was. And so in the face of all of this, these colonists widely accepted these verdicts. There was no riots after. There were no protests after. And I think that really speaks volumes to how Adams handled it and how he was focusing so much on the importance of due process. He actually remarked many years later that his defense was one of the most gallant, he says, quote, one of the most gallant, generous, manly, and disinterested actions of my whole life, and one of the best pieces of service I ever rendered my country. Here's the thing. You need both the Sam Adams and the John Adams. It's good cop and bad cop in a way. You need the skillful legal maneuvers and quiet operations of John Adams, and you need the fiery orations and the messaging machinations of Sam Adams. You have to have both, because a movement moves best with a balance between the two. Now, having said this, I think it would be dumb for people to sit here and infer from this that I'm comparing McConnell to Adams, because I'm not. I'm looking at the approach specifically, because comparison of an approach is not comparison of a case, especially when it's so damn clear cut like the Biden scandals. I think McConnell and others, they have to demonstrate this adherence to the inquiry process, because Americans must see, we have to see how our republic is supposed to function. I mean, we have gone so long without seeing it. We need to see it function like that again. An inquiry as it's supposed to proceed, with actual criminal charges brought about by evidence, as opposed to this, like, Pyrrhic victory of an optic at the expense of what? Faith in government? Like that kind of inquiry and the results bought from that, that's a lasting one. And so that's what I'm looking at here, because he's very careful in how he moves. And when he remarks on something, it's kind of like how Johnny Carson wouldn't weigh in on anything. And when he did, that was considered the end of it. Oh, Johnny Carson weighed in. So that's the prevailing thought. He's very similar in terms of strategy. And I think that I think that you have to have both of those approaches. And I think he's providing one approach. And you have to have the people who are real fiery about it. You have to have those two. You need both. You have to have one to encourage and one to temper. So I think that Republicans need to let him play this card. So that's why I'm not like going out there and getting all, because this is the guy also, I see some of the other stuff that he does. He shepherds some of this stuff in there that, Democrats definitely wouldn't like. And I have no doubt that he would expertly really prosecute any kind of trial should the GOP win the Senate in 2024 and something like this is brought about. So I'm just saying, I think they need to let him play this card.